These are your top tournament plays for Week 10. I'm Pat Mayo, filling in for Mike Cardano. Our goal here is to help users find players with big upside and potential low ownership to help separate you from the field and climb the leaderboard. So let's start with quarterbacks. It's been a disappointing year for Cam Newton, to say the least. He battled health issues early in the season, and that impacted his rushing totals. And he's coming off his worst performance of his career against a pretty soft Saints defense. The primetime struggles for Newton will likely push his ownership down, and his struggles are certainly reflected in his price. While Newton has failed to exceed 20 DraftKings points in all but one start, the lone exception was a 38.06 point outburst. He still has the potential, and in recent weeks, he's been using his legs more. He has at least 7 carries in each of his last 4 games, and he's averaging 10.75 carries for 53.75 yards and half a touchdown a game. He gets an Eagles defense that has allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks and has allowed at least 16 fantasy points to every starter that isn't named Eli Manning. For the risk-tolerant, Newton earns consideration as the top cash game play in this elite matchup. But me? I choose to view him as the single best tournament option at quarterback of anyone on the board. LeVeon Bell's price point's pretty fair, but relative to the rest of the position, it's a tad expensive. And he's facing a Jets defense allowing just 3.53 yards per carry to opposing running backs this season. And with all the attention turned towards the Steelers' surging passing game, Bell is going to be under-owned, and his price tag isn't prohibitive. He's averaging just over 5 receptions per game, and against that solid Jets defense, I expect him to be more involved in the passing game this week. Those touches in space give him some big play potential. And Bell has actually found the end zone more this season as a receiver, 2, than as a runner, 1. Denard Robinson faces a Cowboys defense that ranks in the bottom 10 of Pro Football Focus's run defense rankings. Robinson has been impressive as a starter, topping 100 total yards in each of his last 3 games and finding the end zone twice during that span. His price tag isn't particularly cheap, and Jags running backs are perpetually lower owned for fears of game script working against them. But the Cowboys' last 5 games have all been within 1 score in the final quarter, and with Tony Romo's health in question, this game has potential written all over it. Robinson has the big playability you want out of a tournament running back. He's broken at least 1 run of 20 or more yards in each of his 3 starts. So low ownership, coupled with big play potential and a plus matchup, represent a nice opportunity for tournament appeal. Alshon Jeffery is a bit more expensive than Brandon Marshall, and since Marshall receives more targets, 64 to 57, Marshall's likely going to be the default choice for exposure to the Bears' passing game. Now, this makes Jeffery a compelling tournament option. By most metrics, Jeffery is the better receiver than Marshall. He's turned his 57 targets into 563 yards, while Marshall has turned 64 targets into just 384 yards. He's averaged 1.9 yards per pass route run compared to Marshall's 1.24. In a game with the highest total of the week, Jeffery is likely going to be the 4th most popular wide receiver owned. His ownership won't represent his upside accurately, which makes him a strong tournament play. Eric Decker is perhaps the most underrated touchdown scoring wide receiver in the league. Since Decker's 2nd season in the NFL, he scored 37 touchdowns. The only players ahead of him during that span are Marshawn Lynch, Arian Foster, Jimmy Graham, Rob Gronkowski, and Dez Bryant. Now, some will point to Peyton Manning's presence, but 1.5 of those 4 seasons have been quarterbacked by Tim Tebow and Geno Smith. Eric Decker scores touchdowns, and touchdowns win tournaments. The Jets' passing game rarely inspires confidence, but Decker has seen 51 targets over his last 5 games and found the end zone in 3 of them. The yardage totals haven't been great as of late, but Decker has a history of big play potential. He'll match up with Cortez Allen quite a bit, and Allen ranks 108 out of 109 in Pro Football Focus's quarterback rankings. The Jets have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends this season, and Heath Miller has 2 20-plus point performances in favorable matchups this season. His price tag isn't great, and the production is very volatile, which is what we want to target in tournament lineups. The most common tournament stacks with Roethlisberger will all feature Antonio Brown, and rightly so. But if Miller has the big game, it creates leverage against those that field Brown. If Miller's scoring touchdowns, it makes it tougher for Brown to reach his high ceiling as well. It's a lower probability strategy, but the kind that hits big in tournaments. If you want more in-depth analysis on market share leaders for the season, head over to rotoexperts.com and sign up for our weekly fantasy football package. Our experts Drew Dinkmeyer and Mike Leone get you ready every week with strategy articles, site-specific cheat sheets, and recommendations that highlight top values at each position. They also send you an updated injury information right to your inbox with our lineup alerts and features. Become a member of the Daily Fantasy Rundown team by signing up for the weekly fantasy football package.